the history of Carnival and it's been documented by Arthur Halley, who was really the originator of Carnival. It was in 1931. He and two other gentlemen from the Chamber of Commerce were calling on Herbert Jennings, who was the manager of the Lowe's theaters in Memphis. Jennings had this idea. He said, you know, we're showing a movie called A Cabin in the Cotton. And he says, this city is so dependent on cotton. Why don't you, do something to promote cotton? Because back then cotton was selling like 7.5 cents a pound. They thought that was a great idea. And the story goes that they got so excited about it that they were in the theater office and they'd all gone through a big bag of peanuts. And they went through, I don't know how many bags of popcorn, and the whole floor was littered with shells. Everett Cook, who later became a general in World War II, and Halley stayed up till 3 in the next morning putting together the first carnival.
Kids get involved in Carnival and they never forget their first year. I must have been about 8 years old. Somebody said, would you like to be a page? I didn't get that question. My parents just said, you're going to be a page to Memphis.
Seeing my mother and father get dressed up in a wild-looking outfit to go to Memphis parties. I was asked to be a Memphis page. Then the next year, I was asked to be a Carnival page. But I can remember going to Crump Stadium to an event, and we tied helium balloons to our hats, and we thought that was pretty cute, but the people in charge of the pages didn't like it so much, but it was fun.
Well, I'd never been downtown before, for one thing. The small steamboat, paddle wheel boat, pulled up, and there was gangplank came down, and the king and queen got off, and they got into horse-drawn carriages. That's the reason I can still remember it, because it was such a memorable experience. I was awestruck, I would say.
I really didn't know what it was all about, but I guess my first real involvement was when, I guess it was Michael Thompson and Mimsy Pettit. They invited Maggie to be one of Mimsy's pages. That was really, really enjoyable, and my first taste of really getting involved to some degree, and she had the time of her life.
Well, being a parade marshal was probably the one that I did the longest. I did that for 25 years, as long as we had parades. And then when Arthur died, being the parade chairman itself, and then it was in 1968 that I was chosen to be the president.
I think I was the first king that had girls as pages. It's one of my claims to fame. William Neely Mallory, my uncle, was king in '35. My father was king in 1941. He was the only king who was king for 5 years. And I said, Dad, you can't be king for 5 years. They do it every year. Well, it turned out he was king in 1941 when Carnival then stopped for the World War II. So he claims a record for the longest serving king of Carnival, I think. And then I was a page in the late 40s, early 50s for King Ned Cook. And my sister, Claire Watson Mallory, was queen in 1957. I wanted to come home from school, but my parents wouldn't let me. All I got to see was a picture of her kissing Elvis.
I was floored when you guys walked in and said that you wanted me to be king of Carnival. As I recall, I said, well, I got to think about it. I got to talk to my wife about it. So I go home and I tell Pat, I said, Pat, this is what happened. She said, that's easy, you're going to do it. Maggie was a page in '97. She was queen in '07. Our older son, Tyler, was a scarab the year that I was king in '02. And then what was really, really neat is when Maggie was queen, I've got 4 grandchildren and all 4 of them were pages to her. So we got to spend a full week just having a ball, being around each other and everybody having fun. So that was neat.
My first job that I can recall was being a parade marshal. I had an uncle who was involved in Carnival, and he had a daughter who was queen. My mother was actually queen of Carnival in 1931, which was the third Carnival. I have a son who had been a page and had a sister who was involved in Carnival, and we had a history there that Carnival was always something that our family participated in.
When the carnival started, our depression in the 30s of the worst kind this country's ever had, and one of the main principles was to have something that was fun and lift the spirits of everybody that lived here.
I met lots of very fine people throughout the community, not only socially, but business people.
I found out so much more about Memphis and what's going on in Memphis than I knew, and I've been here since 1963.
It means tradition and family and business and good times and a uniqueness that makes Memphis stand out amongst a lot of other southern or American cities. So I think they called it the party with a purpose.
We made a concerted effort to talk about business and industry and how the carnival event affected the community by bringing us together.
It really broadened a lot my view of the community, what's going on in the community, the sheriff's department, the police department, what they did. I always got a big kick out of that, and I still have great friendships with a lot of those guys. I wanted it and think about it as being a catalyst for having something that the entire community can be involved in. And I think that it brings people together, as I said earlier, that you'd never meet, you'd never know anything about them. And they're wonderful people that give a lot of time and effort to having fun, but also giving a lot back to the community.
The most exciting thing that I ever worked on in Carnival was the Air Force Thunderbirds put on an air show over Mud Island, over the river, before it got dark. That was the most thrilling event that I ever got involved with, and that was really exciting because I like flying myself.
I won't name names, but well, I'll name a couple of them. I can remember going down Central, right there, close to the Pink Palace, and doing about 75, 80 miles an hour. And the fellow that's driving me, we're just having a blast. And it's about 9 o'clock at night, and other, cars don't know what the heck's going on that are out there. But, so he pulls out his pistol and shoots it up in the air a couple of times as we go by.
Well, they used to always mistreat the king because it was your wife's night. It was the forgotten woman's night. I'm in a bathtub with fishnet all over me. Mrs. Clyde Patton, Effie Patton, came by and threw a drink on me while I'm in this tub. And the next morning I had an early appointment, and I went to see this man who was a prospect for leasing some warehouse space. On the front page of the paper was me in that tub. And he said, "Well, looks like you had a nice time last night."
And then we were going out to Lakeland one night, and we were on the expressway. And of course we had two or three motorcycles in front of us and 2 or 3 behind us, and probably going 80 miles an hour. They were up there making cars move over out of the left lane, and they didn't know what was going on, but they'd have their sirens and their lights, and these cars, you could almost see their eyes when you went by about what the heck is this thing? And there's one car that would not move over, and they probably didn't know what to do. So he pulls off on the shoulder. Now he's probably doing 80 miles an hour to get up to him, and starts kicking the side of their car door and telling them to move over, which that got their attention.
The Top Hat dinner was one of the great dinners of all time. Many times, you'd see the sun come up while you're driving home. I happened to ride to one of them with Kemmons Wilson, who was a wonderful citizen, wonderful friend. And I'm sitting right next to Kemmons, and I'll look over and it's time for him to give a toast and he's sound asleep. So I give him a little nudge and they get ready to call on you. And he got up and did a great job, of course.
I think the best time was probably the barge landing. Charlie Daniels was there to perform for the fans and the audience. Queen Nanny McFadden and I came up the river on the barge. The skies let loose with tremendous thunderstorm, and everybody said, what do we do? Should we call it off? Should we keep going? Somebody said, you're the king. So you're right, I am the king. Let's do it. We called off the rain. Charlie Daniels played. I think it was a great success because I had a great time.
We had a newspaper in Memphis called the Press-Scimitar, and the editor was Ed Meeman. And Bill Fisher was always saying that Mr. Meeman, every time he sees me, he says, you need to have a fun group connected with Carnival, sort of like jesters or people that cut up. And at one of the meetings, somebody, and I can't remember who it might have been, suggested we call them the Boll Weevils.
My year as king was the first year of the Boll Weevils. Idea was that they create the Boll Weevils to poke fun at the Carnival leadership. As they grew, I think they were well accepted. They did a good job of bringing a new element to Carnival, and I think it's worked out well. I know I still have a Boll Weevil pin that I was given, a little silver pin, and I have it attached to my medallion, and I wear it very proudly.
They bring a lot of excitement. When that Boll Weevil truck shows up, the place goes crazy.
I think there's a lot of misconception about what those guys do. They work year-round. They'll go to a lot of these children's charities. I mean, you go in there with them and watch them, and the tears actually, they come to your eyes, and I've had them rolling down my cheeks watching those guys. They do some crazy things, and they do things that can make you mad, but I have great respect for them.
The main purpose of Carnival is now to fund these children's charities.
The outreach that it does now through its donations to charity is all positive.
And then I think what really was important is to getting involved in the charities, children's charities, and that's been one of the best events and best things Carnival's ever done.
I'm real proud of Carnival and what it's done with the children's charities and raising money for them and going and visiting during the season, and that's pretty special.
Trying to think, I believe it was Stuart Collier was the one that really, as I remember, carried this idea. But all the other industries we have here, including his business, which is insurance, needed to be honored also because they were very important to the economy of this city.
It's an opportunity for business executives when they move to Memphis to get involved in the cruise and Memphis particularly and Osiris and others that you interact in the community.
There's more to our economy than just cotton, and the river was one of the main reasons we have commerce here, and so it was called the River Carnival. I think when they dropped cotton, but the river didn't quite fit either. So then we just dropped it, and it's just Carnival Memphis.
I think that gives a chance to highlight some folks that don't ordinarily get to be highlighted. Big important law firms that we have, like FedEx, like the banks, securities firms, and this gives an opportunity for the rest of the community to find out a lot more about what goes on in the business world.
Whether it be agriculture or it be medicine or it be entertainment or real estate. They even recognized the lawyers, I think, one time. And they had to get that cleared by the lawyers to make sure they had all the paperwork done right, I think.
And I think it's really great to honor the folks that have meant a heck of a lot to this community over a long period of time.
One of the things that we've done in the last 4 or 5 years is reacquaint ourselves with Mardi Gras.
Every year, several people will go from Carnival down to Mardi Gras and be guests of some of the crews down there, and even ride in the floats and, you know, throw. I went down one time and we rode in the Rex Parade, and my arm and shoulder were sore for probably 2 or 3 weeks after that from throwing so many beads and little goodies and stuff.
I went back and found some old pictures of my grandmother back in the 1898, I think it was. And it was signed by the Queen of Mardi Gras, or Lady in Waiting of Mardi Gras. So I found that in some old family files, and I took that to Mardi Gras and said, we want to give you this and establish a new relationship with Mardi Gras. Why don't you invite us down there to Mardi Gras, and we'll invite you up here to Carnival. So we have a Mardi Gras home and home event once a year.
And I think they see a value in it as well. I like to argue with them a little bit or goose them about Mobile really was where Mardi Gras started, and they don't agree with that at all. They've got a historian that preached a sermon to me one night at dinner for about an hour when I said that, and I was just saying it to just kind of gig him, but he was giving me all kind of history about how, well, it wasn't really Mardi Gras, it was something else in Mobile. They did it before we did Mardi Gras, but Mardi Gras started in New Orleans, and they believe that, and I guess I do too after that hour lecture. Carnival gave a really unique opportunity to get out and see lots of things that you wouldn't even know was going on, all the charitable issues that the Carnival has dealt with, all the different crews, met a gazillion people that I would never have met that are still friends today. I really got to kind of spread my wings a little bit out in the other communities and get to know folks and that surround Memphis.
I got a chance to meet many wonderful people all over the city. You meet a lot of people you wouldn't normally meet. It's a good mixing pot and a good melting pot.
I got to know so many of the policemen and firemen that I would have never ever known otherwise. And there was a policeman that stood on the corner of 3rd Street in Madison. He would yell at me and say hello, and I'd wave back. It got people in this city working together. We had all levels of people, from bank presidents down to, you know, people that picked up trash on the street. People that lived in this city all, you know, felt like, you know, they were brothers.
Where did hip hip come from?
There was a fellow named Chester Shields, and he was the commander of the Royal Guards, and he looked like General Patton or something. I'm not so sure that hip hip hooray didn't start with those guards. Maybe Chester Shields or some one of those guards started that hip hip hooray. Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray!
Hip hip hooray!
Hip hip hooray!
Hip hip hooray!
Excellent.
You all are so full of bullshit.